the richest source of archaeological treasures on the planet.
Oh, wow, look at that!
Hidden beneath this desert landscape lie the secrets of this ancient civilization.
I never seen something like this.
Now, for a full season of excavations, our cameras have been given unprecedented access to follow teams on the front line of archaeology.
This is the most critical moment.
Revealing buried treasures.
Oh, we're lucky today.
Wow, lots of mummies.
The smell is horrible.
And making discoveries that could rewrite ancient history.
We've never had the proof until now.
This is where it all started.
My goodness, I never expected this.
This time, archaeologists hunt for evidence of the death of the pyramids.
My God, these pieces are huge.
Claire follows the tracks of the craftsmen tasked with building the giant monuments.
You can see very clearly that this site was abandoned here.
Miriam uncovers the mysteries of the pharaoh's temples.
This is from Tomb 22, the mummy deposit.
And Alejandro comes face to face with the afterlife.
It's incredible.
In the long-forgotten tombs of Egypt's far south.
I have no words.
The west bank of the River Nile, home to the world's most iconic monuments, the mighty pyramids of Giza. The pyramids once housed the bodies of the pharaohs. But though ancient Egyptian civilization lasted for nearly 3,000 years, its kings only built huge tombs like these for a few centuries. Egyptologists are still trying to piece together why the pharaohs stopped constructing giant pyramids. For Egyptologist Chris Naunton, the majesty of the ancient structures makes the fact that Egyptians gave up building them all the more incredible. 10 miles south of the legendary pyramids of Giza is Saqqara.
When we think about pyramids, we tend to think of Giza, I think, and the Great Pyramid of Khufu in particular, but actually this is where it all began.
Chris has come to the birthplace of pyramid building to search for clues to why Egyptians built giant pyramids for less than 500 years. Constructed a century before the iconic pyramids at Giza, Egypt's first pyramid is a 200-foot-tall mausoleum of 6 huge limestone platforms, carefully engineered to spread the weight of rock and prevent collapse. Deep inside is a giant shaft, 26 feet wide and 82 feet deep. At the bottom, the intended final resting place of the pharaoh Djoser.
Ultimately, that's what it's all about. That's where the body of the king is going to rest in eternity, and to have gone to all this trouble to create this incredible monument around the body of that person, it's pretty amazing.
To house his mummy, huge chunks of granite were slid down a passage into the shaft and stacked, creating a giant sarcophagus 19 feet long and 11 feet high.
My God, these pieces are huge. Wow, it's amazing.
But this wasn't just a tomb designed to secure the pharaoh's physical body for eternity. Crucially, for success in the afterlife, the pyramid ensured the king was remembered by the living. Completed around 2650 BC, it sparked an architectural revolution. Djoser's 6-tiered giant wasn't just the first pyramid. It was the world's first monumental structure built in stone. Over the next century, Egypt's kings developed the concept, building monumental tombs all along the Nile's west bank, including the first geometrically true pyramid, the Red Pyramid, and a misshapen experiment, the Bent Pyramid. Then, a dynasty of pharaohs built the most iconic monuments in Egypt, the pyramids of Giza. But just a few short centuries after the Great Pyramid of Khufu rose from the desert, a new era was on the horizon. 400 miles south of the pyramids, in modern-day Aswan, is the heart of ancient Egypt's southernmost province. Professor Alejandro Jimenez Serrano has spent 11 seasons here, unearthing the burials of the region's wealthy governors. He believes they played a part in the pyramids' demise. The pyramids were symbols of power, separating the kings from the rest of society, offering them privileged access to the afterlife. But as the pharaohs erected their pyramids in the north, southern elites were becoming richer and making their own plans for eternity, digging increasingly elaborate tombs deep into the cliffs. Today, Alejandro's excavating a new area of their ancient necropolis.
Ancient Egyptian society is reflected on the cemeteries, so we can see how the life was just excavating the tombs.
It's 8 a.m., and his team has already called in a find.
We will see if we are lucky with this discovery. Not every day you discover a tomb, so finger crossed.
A smooth area of rock excites the crew.
In this area, you can see the ancient carving trying to make a plane that was going to be the facade of the tomb.
The naturally jagged rock face has been smoothed with ancient chisels. If this is an elite tomb, it could have inscriptions which shed light on the role the governors played in the pyramid's decline.
This is the typical tomb of members of the elite here in Kubet el-Hawa. So what we are looking for is the door.
400 miles downriver on the Nile's west bank, Chris has come to Giza to explore the peak of pyramid building. He wants to understand how these monuments evolved from the early pyramids at Saqqara, and to search for clues to explain why they were abandoned. These stone giants included new designs to protect the body of the pharaoh from robbers after his death. On the outside of Khufu's Great Pyramid, a seamless cover of gleaming limestone slabs and blocks concealed the only way into the pyramid. A narrow tunnel, 60 feet above the ground. But this passage too was sealed. Intruders would have to break through huge 6-foot-deep granite blocks to reach a steep shaft leading to the center of the pyramid. At the top, they would face 3 more massive granite slabs before they finally reached the tomb chamber, where the king and his riches lay buried. Alongside the Great Pyramid, Khufu's son, Khafre, built his own pyramid. And below it, a complex of monuments and temples designed to aid his successful resurrection. Priests would come here to make offerings in the shadow of the pyramid, ensuring the pharaoh's name was kept alive. One of these monuments, carefully positioned, is the ancient world's most enigmatic sculpture, the Great Sphinx.
The Egyptians were very interested in alignments, and one of the great achievements here at the Giza Plateau is in their ability to lay out monuments like this on a vast scale. The Sphinx and the temple in front of it and the pyramid behind are actually all very carefully aligned with one another.
Chris searches for evidence of when the pharaohs abandoned their monuments. Between the creature's paws, he finds a slab of a different stone, added 1,000 years later. The Dream Stealer.
It's called the Dream Stealer because the text describes a story in which, before he was king, Thutmose IV had a dream in which the Sphinx spoke to him. And the Sphinx says, "I'm not in terribly good condition. I've fallen into disrepair.
The hieroglyphs claim the Sphinx had been allowed to drown in the desert sands, but that Thutmose would be rewarded for restoring the sculpture to its former glory.
If Thutmose IV to be could make the repairs that are necessary and clear the sand away, then in exchange the Sphinx itself will bestow the kingship upon the young prince. So in other words, the deal is, if Thutmose IV does what the Sphinx wants, he'll become king.
Thutmose believed that to become pharaoh, he had to please his glorious ancestors and make sure the ancient pharaoh's monuments were remembered and respected. When he became pharaoh, Thutmose did renovate the Sphinx during a period known as the New Kingdom, the pinnacle of Egyptian power in a history stretching back thousands of years. The first small settlements sprang up on the Nile around 5000 BC, farming the fertile land and eventually growing into the state of Egypt. Around 2700 BC, the Old Kingdom began, the time of the great pyramid builders. But in 2175 BC, their civilization came crashing down as rule disintegrated and Egypt descended into chaos. 500 years later, the New Kingdom was born, the golden age of Tutankhamun, Queen Nefertiti, and Ramesses the Great. But these pharaohs built no pyramids at all. By the time Thutmose IV had rescued the Sphinx from the sands, the pharaoh's construction of Egypt's most iconic monuments had been totally abandoned. But why? 75 miles to the east of the pyramids is Ain Soukna on Egypt's Red Sea coast. French archaeologist Claire Somaglino has been digging up ancient structures here for 9 years. She believes this remote outpost holds secrets that explain the pyramid's boom and bust. Many of the structures she has found date to the peak of pyramid construction.
We have multiple layers of the Old Kingdom here, from the very beginning of the use of the site during the reign of Khafre.
But of all the buildings she unearths, none shows any sign of long-term occupation. Ain Soukna appears to be an encampment.
There are dwellings and workshops and cooking area and everything they need during an expedition. So they just occupy the site for 2 or 3 months.
Claire searches for clues to what this camp could reveal about Egypt's Age of the Pyramid book, made by people who passed through. Some of the carvings date back only half a century, but others are thousands of years old.
The most ancient one preserved are these inscriptions of the king Amenhotep IV, and it says that in the first year of the reign of this king, he sent an expedition to retrieve copper, and just after Amenhotep IV, Amenhotep I sent an expedition of 4,000 men this time, so huge expeditions at that time.
The graffiti suggests the camp of Ain Soukna was a staging post in a supply chain, one providing a resource that the pharaohs needed more than any other for their pyramid building: the must-have metal for ancient stone carving, copper. Claire believes it came from the mines of Sinai across the Red Sea. When the pharaoh needed more copper, he sent an army of workers east across the desert. Some of them carried flat-pack boats, which were assembled at the coast and sailed across the Red Sea. The men spent 2 months laboring in the mines of the Sinai, digging out hundreds of pounds of copper ore. And once they'd filled up the ships, they returned with the ore to the mainland, ready to haul back to the Nile and to the pyramids. The discoveries reveal the port of Ain Soukna was critical to building the largest structures the world had ever seen.
Copper was a strategic resource for them because they used copper to make some tools, and that was very important to the construction sites for pyramids, the Sphinx, and big monuments at that time.
If Claire's to find evidence here of the pyramid's downfall, she needs to dig. On the west bank of the Nile, Egypt's ancient land of the dead, hieroglyphics expert Cristel Alvarez is at the pyramid archaeologists consider to be the last built in the Great Age of Pyramids. The tomb of Pharaoh Pepi II was built 400 years after the original step pyramid at Saqqara.
Oh wow, it's beautiful. And all the colors, the green color is still so vivid.
She hunts for clues to why the obsession with pyramid building began to end here. Hieroglyphs cover almost every surface, including the royal sign bearing the pharaoh's name.
So this is the cartouche of the king, and it says that he will live, he will not die, and it's just the same text that is repeated and repeated over and over again.
The walls of Khufu's tomb in the Great Pyramid at Giza were left blank. But here, in Pepi's tomb, they're filled with incantations designed to help the pharaoh enter the underworld safely.
What we can see from one pyramid to another is this desire to include as many texts as possible and to use all the available space to inscribe the text.
As the age of the pyramids progressed, the pharaohs filled their tombs with more and more magical protection for their bodies and souls. The texts kept their faith in the power of the pyramids alive, just as their power over the kingdom of Egypt was about to collapse. Pepi II's rule was marred by droughts, famine, and civil unrest. Worried about his afterlife, he covered his tomb in magical inscriptions to guarantee his spirit's security. When Pepi died without an heir, a power struggle ensued, resulting in a century of weak, short-lived kings. Lacking wealth and resources, their pyramids were tiny compared to the mighty structures of the Great Pyramid Age.
During the end of the Old Kingdom, we do have many kings that ruled for short periods of time, and most of them we don't have found any of their burial tombs.
The pyramid, a tradition that defined a civilization, was effectively extinct. At Kubet el Hawa, near the southern Egyptian city of Aswan, Alejandro hopes the burials of ancient Egypt's most powerful elites could help explain the death of the pyramids. If this chiseled flat rock wall is a tomb, their secrets could be just below his feet. He spots another clue that a door is nearby.
We have here remains of termites. They used to eat the fresh wood of the coffins. We are following the pathway of the insects.
With delicate artifacts potentially close, the team needs Alejandro's experienced hand.
Yeah, we have the entrance. Amazing. Aha! The end of the door. It's amazing. Yeah, I have no words. Probably we are the first that see this door in more than 4,000 years.
The neatly cut opening matches the style for elites in southern Egypt at the end of the Pyramid Age. It's a huge moment for the entire team.
Mabruk. Mabruk. Shukran.
The race is on to open up the doorway before the site closes for the day in just a few hours' time. It's already mid-morning on Alejandro's dig at Kubet el Hawa, and the workers' shift ends at 1 p.m. Termites may have led him to an elite burial, but to expose the doorway, the team must excavate not just the opening, but the entire area in front of the tomb. If they don't, the sand will just flow right back in. It allows Alejandro a moment to remind himself what he's looking for. Evidence of powerful Egyptian nobles, whose rise spelled the end of the age of the pyramids.
In the period that we are excavating, the head of the state was the king, and under him was the vizier, and below the vizier we have their provincial governors. So these people, we might say that they were the number 3 in the state.
Over 11 seasons working here, Alejandro has found evidence that in this era of Egyptian history, the pharaohs were losing their grip on power. While the kings got weaker, the governors of Egypt's provinces got richer. Alejandro discovers that just as Pharaoh Pepi II was building what would prove to be the last Great Pyramid, the tombs of the governors at Kubet el Hawa were expanding. Over the course of Pepi's reign, they increased in size 5-fold. The afterlife wasn't just for pharaohs, and pyramids weren't the only kind of tomb that could get you there.
This is what we hope to find in the tomb that we have just discovered. It is a false door, and it was the magic door that the dead used to receive the offerings.
Egyptians believed the spirit of the deceased would reveal itself to visitors, taking offerings of food to sustain it in the afterlife. If the new tomb has a false door, it could hold a wealth of hieroglyphic information about how powerful the governors had become at the end of the Pyramid Age.
What we are hoping to find in the new tomb is inscriptions showing us not only the name but also his position in the society.
With the site ready to close for the day at 1 p.m., they've excavated just far enough for one person to enter. Alejandro gives in to temptation.
Game?
We have a lot of sand. And there is no trace of plundering.
Looting was rife in ancient Egypt. Even the giant pyramids at Giza were ransacked and cleared of valuables. With no evidence of robbery, there's good reason for Alejandro to be optimistic about the treasures that may lie beneath the tons of sand.
Archaeology is patient. It's a patient work that sometimes has lucky strikes.
At Ain Sukna, on Egypt's Red Sea coast, Claire's team opens a new trench at the ancient encampment.
Adeline, ça va?
Her colleague, archaeologist Adeline Batts, is piecing together the history of the pharaoh's copper expeditions.
Adeline is drawing the stratigraphy that we have here. This is a very interesting one because you can see all the different layers of occupation of this part of the site.
Tu viens m'aider?
Non, je vais pas t'aider, je viens voir ce que tu fais.
We have some ceramic.
She notices a gap in the record.
So you can see very clearly the different occupation layers because you have ashes mixed with clay and sand. And so we have these Old Kingdom layers here. It's very clear in the stratigraphy that the site was abandoned here.
A thick layer of mud laid down over decades by winds and flooding covers the ashes of the workers' cooking fires from the age of the pyramids. The discovery shows no one came here for a century or more. It's critical evidence of the death of the pyramids, revealing that the pharaohs gave up their copper expeditions. The decline in their wealth meant they could no longer afford to build giant pyramids. As quickly as it had begun, the Pyramid Age was over. But the pharaohs' belief in the afterlife was stronger than ever. So how did later kings protect their bodies and secure their passage to eternity? "700 years after the pharaoh Pepi II built the last Great Pyramid, the pharaohs of the New Kingdom had re-established their supreme power in Egypt and moved their capital south to Thebes, modern-day Luxor. Chris crosses the Nile River here to investigate how the New Kingdom rulers sought to guarantee their afterlife. These wealthy pharaohs could have afforded tombs as grand as Khufu's Great Pyramid. But during the chaos following the end of the old pharaoh's reign, the ancient pyramids were ransacked. Ancient texts describe the turmoil as bodies were cast out from tombs and funerary goods disappeared. The pharaoh's mummies were stolen or destroyed, along with their dreams of eternal life. Desperate to avoid that fate, the pioneering New Kingdom pharaoh, Thutmosis I, embarked on a revolution in royal tomb building. Echoing the governors in the south, he decided to cut his tomb into the rock. His plan to protect his mummy was to hide. In a valley west of Thebes, the king picked a spot and dug a shaft over 600 feet deep into the mountain. It had subterranean chambers for the riches he'd take into the afterlife. And in a lavish tomb at the bottom of the tunnel, a sarcophagus would keep his body safe. Following his example, nearly every pharaoh for the next 500 years dug tombs into the mountain here to provide underworld palaces, creating a subterranean city of dead royals that became known as the Valley of the Kings. One of the best preserved tombs in the valley belonged to one of Egypt's greatest pharaohs, Ramesses III.
As soon as you enter this tomb, you're really struck by the sort of monumental scale. All the surfaces are decorated, hieroglyphic inscriptions everywhere, large images of the king. Really, really impressive.
Just as Pepi II covered the last Great Pyramid with hieroglyphic spells, Ramesses hoped magical art would secure his dangerous passage to resurrection.
It's a very perilous journey, it's a very hazardous journey, and he encounters all kinds of demons along his way, but with the help of the gods who accompany him throughout the tomb, he's able to make that journey successfully.
The New Kingdom pharaohs believed their rock-cut tombs would protect their mummies where the pyramids had failed. But Ramesses' architects left nothing to chance, designing precipitous shafts as they tunneled into the rock.
This is a pretty important part of the tomb. It's a well shaft, which is a characteristic feature of tombs in the Valley of the Kings, designed to deter robbers, beautifully decorated with images of gods.
Even buried hundreds of feet down in the heart of the mountain, Ramesses feared his tomb would be pillaged.
Even though the tomb would have been sealed, and the idea would have been, of course, that nobody would ever come in here again, it's still incredibly beautifully decorated. For the eyes of the gods only, perhaps.
There was just one problem. To live on in eternity, a king needed not just to preserve his body, he had to be remembered by the living. The pyramids had monuments and temples attached where priests celebrated the memory of the dead pharaoh. Ramesses did not want to advertise the location of his body and his riches with a pyramid, but he still needed a monument to keep his name alive. On the west bank of the Nile, near Thebes, Ramesses erected a gigantic 80-foot gate, on which he carved huge images of himself smiting his foes. Behind it, his mortuary temple, 2 courtyards lined with his statues, led to a series of chapels and a false door, where priests would make offerings and repeat his name. Surrounding the temple, he built mud brick walls 30 foot thick, stretching more than half a mile, to turn his temple into a fortress of worship. Just a mile from Ramesses' temple lies another great monument to a new kingdom pharaoh. Thutmosis III's Temple of Millions of Years. The temple has crumbled since ancient times, but Dr. Miriam Seco Alvarez is leading a project to resurrect the site.
When we started the project in 2008, all this was a mountain of sand. Nothing was visible.
She wants to discover exactly how these new monuments were intended to secure the pharaoh's afterlife without a pyramid. Archaeologist Manuel Aballera searches outside the walls for clues to how the temple was used. He meticulously records every find workers unearth around the temple walls.
Nice. Shukran.
Ancient Egyptians made offerings of food, like dates, to the memory of the pharaoh. But among the 3,500-year-old fruit, he finds more valuable objects.
We have jars that had beer inside. It's one of the most important offerings in the past. We have found thousands of jars here.
The beer jar offerings mean archaeologist Javier Martinez Babon can track the temple's history. Some bear the signature hieroglyphs of later pharaohs.
Here, for example, we have the name of Thutmose IV. Here we have the name of Tutankhamun. Other kings and other queens gave these offerings for the memory of the king.
The jars prove that for centuries, Egypt's rulers made offerings at this temple to keep Thutmosis III's name alive, while his mummy lay safely hidden in the Valley of the Kings. But Miriam is discovering that Egyptians didn't just leave offerings of beer and food at the temple. With just minutes before the site closes for the day, Miriam's team unearths a burial.
Vosotros dos, ¿no?
The site has strict time curfews, and a skeleton can't be left exposed overnight.
If we find a body, we have to remove in the same day. If we find something special, we have to remove to be secure.
The team scrambles to move the ancient skeleton before the site shuts down.
Oh, in 20 minutes we will finish, so that's why we are a little in a hurry. Para allá, para la sombra, a ponerle la sombra.
With minutes to go before the gates slam shut, the skeleton is safe and ready for analysis. It could hold clues to how well the temple safeguarded the pharaoh's afterlife in the era after the death of the pyramids. The skeleton unearthed outside Thutmosis III's temple is not the first Miriam's team has discovered. It's one of more than 125 ancient bodies they've unearthed around the site, many from a single tomb. Why they are here is a mystery, but some are preserved in almost pristine condition. The bodies could shed light on how Thutmosis's temple was supposed to function after his death. Miriam has made it her mission to search every ancient body for clues. Next in line is a fully wrapped mummy. She can't risk removing the linen bandages, so dental expert Dr. Roger Seiler uses X-rays to scan for information.
We want to see who was this individual. If it's a male or female, we want to see the age, what they eat, as much as possible about this person. A ver. Ah. We have the head.
Roger examines the skull to determine the skeleton's sex and age at death.
So the individual is about 18, 20, 25 years old. The teeth are in good health, so it's a young individual.
Ah, okay.
That's important.
And we know if it's male or female?
the angle here could say that's female.
Female, maybe female.
Maybe female, together with the form of the chin.
The X-ray suggests the body is of a young woman.
This is from tomb 22, from the late period, where we found the mummy deposit.
Yes.
The tomb she was buried in dates to a time nearly 1,000 years after the temple was built. It's a hint that the temple was considered sacred long after Thutmose III had died. If he was still remembered, then his afterlife was secure.
Now we have to go deeper to get more information.
Miriam needs to discover who these people were to shed light on why they were buried here. They work through the dozens of mummies found at the site.
The head is missing, but this is I think it's an organ package. So they took out the inner organs, they mummified them separately and put them back. Good mummification technique.
So some of the mummies in this mummy deposit were high quality.
High quality mummification.
Mummification, yes.
The mummies suggest that high-status ancient Egyptians were burying their dead here almost to the end of ancient Egyptian civilization. They believed this site held a power that would help propel their souls to the afterlife. The team will need to keep examining and comparing the finds. But with this analysis complete, Miriam can return the body to its eternal rest. They carefully lower the precious remains 15 feet down the vertical shaft.
This is the most critical moment, and always we are worried. Tani, Shoya.
The mummy is safely in the burial chamber.
Well done.
The team lays it to rest.
We have one more individual in peace.
Miriam's discoveries suggest the temple remained sacred for nearly 1,000 years after Thutmose III's death, preserving his memory and his eternal life just as long as his body lay safe in the Valley of the Kings. The New Kingdom pharaoh's afterlife plan appeared to be working. On the hillside of Kubet el Hawa, near modern-day Aswan, Alejandro and his team have removed more than 1,000 cubic feet of sand from the newly discovered tomb.
We have been working outside and inside, and we have the possibility to have access to check if we have some remains of the original burials.
If the tomb contains hieroglyphic inscriptions or grave goods, it could help him identify the owner and uncover the burial practices of the nobles challenging the pyramid-building pharaoh's power.
I can see several fragments of bones.
The bones survive, but whose are they? Alejandro's discovery of human remains proves beyond doubt that he's found a new tomb at Kubet el Hawa. But what he needs is hieroglyphs to identify the tomb owner and their status. If a mummy once lay in this chamber, perhaps the valuable funerary artifacts remain in an adjacent cavity.
It's incredible. We have just the same material as we found in the other chamber.
The tomb's second chamber is empty. It has almost certainly been entered by thieves. But Alejandro finds that it hasn't just been robbed. Telltale tracks on the walls show it has been ravaged by an even more destructive force.
We can guess that here there were coffins, there were perhaps boxes, and everything was eaten by the termites. I've never seen something like this. So wherever you look at that. These are termites. I hate termites. Quite disappointing. a deception. But it's part of the game. Let's go.
Like the pyramids, the tombs cut into the rock here couldn't always save the owners from destruction. Their carefully laid plans to secure their afterlife were thwarted. But the rich necropolis at Kubet el-Hawa may one day reveal yet more about the part the governors of the south played in the pyramid's decline.
We have been very lucky during all the seasons that we have been working in Kubet el-Hawa. We have discovered 3 new tombs, 9 intact burial chambers. But we have discovered also that sometimes the story has not the same end.
He may not have found hieroglyphic treasures this time, but next time, Alejandro could be luckier. In the Valley of the Kings, the New Kingdom pharaohs dug their tombs deep into the mountains to protect them from robbers. Chris has come to the most iconic tomb of all to find out how well they succeeded. The tomb of Tutankhamun, discovered deep beneath layers of rubble by archaeologist Howard Carter in 1922.
So this is the exact spot where Carter would, for the first time, have made a little hole in this blocking here and been able to see through into the antechamber. So this is the moment where, famously, he's asked, "Can you see anything?" And he says wonderful things. That's because he's looking into this chamber, the antechamber, which is absolutely stuffed full of objects, as the whole of the tomb was.
Carter had uncovered the richest collection of artifacts ever discovered from Egypt's Golden Age, including the pharaoh's famous mask. But for Chris, the modern mythology of the riches of Tutankhamun's tomb is not the full story. It did contain wonderful things, but the tomb was not undisturbed. Tutankhamun's funerary furniture was piled up chaotically, as if ready to be removed.
The tomb was robbed, perhaps just a few days after the funeral when Tutankhamun's body was introduced to the tomb for the first time.
Small valuables seem to have been taken by opportunistic looters. They had left the larger items, perhaps intending to come back, but something stopped them.
We now know there was a flash flood in the valley which deposited a mass of material on top of the entranceway to the tomb, and once it dried out, it solidified to the consistency of cement. It was impenetrable, and the location of the tomb was lost until Howard Carter excavated the tomb in 1922. That was the first time anybody had seen it since the late 18th dynasty.
Tutankhamun's tomb wasn't the only tomb in the Valley of the Kings plundered by ancient thieves. All the tombs discovered so far were robbed of their treasures long ago. They offered no better protection than the mighty monuments they replaced. The pyramids too had been no match for determined grave robbers. And after years of drought and conflict, the pharaohs could no longer afford to build them. But the pharaohs achieved a different kind of immortality. Their astonishing pyramids